All right, UFC Vancouver, RIDDER versus Allen, full card predictions, starting from the early prelim opener, going all the way to the main event on the main card. This event's not terrible, but I'm going to make it quick because, I don't feel like there's a ton of explaining to do for all these fights. Starting with the early prelim opener, we've got Corden versus Tainara Lisboa. I don't think Lisboa is all that good. She's got a pretty ugly record, 7-3, for having, I think she's got one fight in the UFC, maybe two. Two. She beat Ravena Oliveira, who we'll talk about later, but is not a very good win. And I know Corden, I guess, has the same record that Lisboa had when she joined the UFC in 6-2. However, her first loss was very long ago. It was one of her first two fights, I think, which isn't bad. You got guys like JDM and Zhang Wei Li who lose their first two fights, and then go on to do good things. So I don't hate that. And also, her most recent loss was 2.5 years ago, and it was to Jacqueline Cavalcanti, who I think is pretty good. She's definitely better than Lisboa. So I don't mind that. Lisboa is pretty small for a bantamweight. She's 5'7", which isn't tiny. There are smaller bantamweights. I think Josie Nunes was like 5'4". She's not very big frame wise for the division either. And it's not like Corden is like the broadest or like thickest bantamweight. I think that goes to Norma Dumont. But she's 5'9", which is pretty tall for the division. And she's not terrible, and I don't mind her most recent loss. I'm going to go with her. She's a slight underdog, but she's a woman in Canada, and generally the Canadian women's fighters are pretty solid, and they do good in Canada. I think like Jasmine Jasudavicius and Jillian Robertson are undefeated in like recent Canada events, so I'm going to go with Melissa Corden. Next fight of the card, this is like the probably top 3 fight on this card, and they've got it as the second fight of the card, but it's Azamat Bekoev versus Yousri Belgaroui. I don't think his name is pronounced like that. I think Belgaroui is pronounced a little strangely, but he's pretty good at kickboxing. He's had an interesting little stint in MMA recently. He's 8-3. His most recent loss was to Marco Tullio on the Contender Series. But in kickboxing, he's fought a lot of the greats at middleweight and light heavyweight. He fought Alex Pereira. I think he fought Pereira 3 times or 2 times. I'm pretty sure it's 3. I think he's 2-1 with Pereira, or maybe 1-2. And then he fought Adesanya, and I believe he lost like a split decision, something like that. But yeah, anyways, he's a really good kickboxer, and he's fucking massive for middleweight. He's 6'5". But he's fighting, MMA, and he's fighting Azamat Bekoev, who I think is a pretty good prospect. Bekoev, I was a little low on him coming into the UFC because he hadn't been tested a ton. I don't remember if he fought on the Contender Series or not, but his debut was against Zach Reese. And everyone picked him to beat Zach Reese because Zach Reese is a bum. However, the only thing I remembered about him coming to the UFC was that he had fought Dylan Budka, and I think Dylan Budka is horrible. Pretty sure Dylan Budka went like 0-4 in the UFC, but he had a pretty close fight with Bekoev. But Budka also had a really close fight with someone else that was pretty solid before the UFC. I can't remember exactly who it was. And maybe he's not terrible. He's got kind of a difficult style for, fighters that are well-rounded but don't have like great, they don't excel super far in one area. He's not good. I'm not trying to give Dylan Budka any credit. But I've seen Bekoev actually look pretty good in his UFC career. And one thing about Belgaroui in MMA, especially in his most recent Contender Series fight, which he won by finish, his guard is a lot different than it was in kickboxing. And I think that's not crazy. Like, a lot of kickboxers have to change their guard because they don't have the massive, 8 or 10 ounce or 12 or 16 ounce gloves, to protect their entire face with like a simple guard. So they adopt like kind of a longer style. And you don't really, you see that with like a guy like Adesanya who, can't just like shell up. And I think Alex Pereira is kind of like a unique outlier because he has like such a unique guard anyways. But when that happens, you see a lot of guys like make a lot of defensive mistakes and get hit more than they should. And I saw that a lot with Belgaroui in his Contender Series fight, his most recent one, where he was clearly better than his opponent on the feet, and he was a lot bigger, but he was getting hit like more than he should have, just because I don't think he was used to this guard, and I also don't think he was used to the smaller gloves, and I don't think you can make those kind of mistakes against Bekoev. And Bekoev is not only like very dangerous on the feet, he's also a very, formidable grappler, compared to a guy like Belgaroui, who is, has no background in a grappling-based martial art. He's a kickboxer. And I know, obviously, Adesanya and obviously Pereira and, Cesar, I guess not even Cesar Almeida. The two, guys that Belgaroui fought in kickboxing, most, notably, were Pereira and Adesanya, who, didn't struggle at all with the grappling in their run to the title. However, you think of a guy like Cesar Almeida, he fought his first good MMA fighter in Roman Kopylov, and he lost a decision because he couldn't, counter grapple. And I think that's probably what we're going to see. Or I can see Bekoev doing what's that motherfucker's name? The really old guy. I don't know. There was a fighter that fought in a ton outside the UFC, and he used to always do this this technique where he would go for almost an ankle pick. Like he would swing his lead hand super low to feint the takedown, and then he would come up with the overhand right. And what the hell is his name? He fought Gegard Mousasi. He fought, I don't know. He's a Russian guy. Oh, it's Shlemenko. I think it's Alexander Shlemenko. He fought a ton outside the UFC. There's a ton of film on him if you want to see that. But he does this thing where he reaches for an angle pick, throws an overhand right, and he cracks strikers who are looking, they're super reactive against a takedown. And I think that Bekoev can do the same thing. And he's got the kind of style he's Russian, and he's got long arms for his height, and he's got a lot of power. And he's a lot shorter than his opponent here, so I could see Belgaroui having his hands really low, looking to stop a takedown, and just leaving his chin wide open to get cracked. So I'm gonna pick Bekoev, but Belgaroui's kind of being doubted in this fight. He's a 2-1 underdog. It says 93% of people on Tapology are picking Bekoev. Belgaroui could have a Adesanya Pereira level run. I think he has a very similar record to what Pereira did when he came into the UFC. So he did lose to Marco Tulio, but Tulio's pretty good. So I don't know. Next fight of the card: Stephanie Luciano versus Ravena Oliveira. I'm going Luciano. Her loss in the UFC was to Sam Hughes. I don't hate that. Honestly, the main reason I don't want to pick Luciano is because her nickname is Rondinha, which is a reference to Ronda Rousey, I'm pretty sure, which is a bad, the only other person I know that has a Ronda Rousey nickname is Irina Alekseeva, and she's fucking horrible. But I'll pick Luciano. Ravena Oliveira is pretty bad, and she's very inactive too, so I'm going to pick Luciano. Next fight of the card: Kyle Prepolec versus Drew Dober. Prepolec? He shouldn't be getting this fight. I know he did not terrible against Benoit Saint-Denis, but I talked, I think, in my last prediction video about how Benoit Saint-Denis is kind of a guy that you can, you can look, you could very easily look not shit against him just because he's so slow. And he's very dangerous, and he's a good grappler, and he's got good pressure, but he is very slow. So even a guy like Moises looked pretty good on the feet against the cage against Benoit Saint-Denis, because Benoit Saint-Denis is pretty slow, and he comes in with his hands down a lot. And we know Thiago Moises isn't all that against the cage on the feet. So, I don't think Prepolec looking decent in that fight is a sign that he's a decent UFC level fighter. And the only reason I'd pick against Drew Dober in a fight like this is because he's pretty old, but he's less than a year older than Kyle Prepolec. So, and honestly, I don't think he's looked that bad in his recent fights. His chin looks like it's been holding up. I know he got hurt a lot in his last fight, and he literally forgot where he was, but he got cracked really bad by Manuel Torres, who's super powerful for the division, who's got some legit knockouts against Nick Mata and people like that. And then he landed standing hammer fist above his head all the way to his feet on Drew Dober, I don't know, 12 of them or something like that. And Drew Dober didn't go out cold. He did forget where he was. He probably was medically unconscious, but he didn't go unconscious, and his chin's still there. So I trust his chin, and then he's still got pop. At least it looks like he's got it in his recent fights. He had a pretty decent fight with Gene Silva. That would have been a close matchup had he not had a really bad cut on his eye from a spinning elbow. So I still think he's decent enough to beat a guy who's not UFC level like Prepolec. But then again, this is the same thing I said about Michel Pereira. versus what's his name? Chris or Chris Dawkins' brother, whatever his name is. So Kyle Dawkins, that's the name. He could lose. I mean, but I don't think he's going to. I don't think Prepolec's all that good. Again, like he's not UFC level. Next fight up the card, Danny Barlow versus Jourdain Santos. Yeah, this is one of those fights where I think both of these guys suck. And not only do they suck, I also think they're like pretty overrated. Danny Barlow has looked pretty shit in all of his fights other than the Josh Quinlan fight. And Josh Quinlan is horrible. And should have never been signed to the UFC. So, don't love that. He did, I guess, technically beat Nikolai Retnikov. But that was a very boring, very low-level fight where both fighters looked like shit. And given all that, I'm still going to pick him against Jourdain Santos, who is also pretty shit. Jourdain Santos lost to Ozzy Diaz, who's not very good. I guess Ozzy Diaz, we can't really call him horrible. I think his only loss in the UFC is to Zhang Mingyang. Maybe he lost someone else. I don't know. And then Jourdain Santos' other his wins, he won against Will Curry, who I think is pretty overrated too. Honestly, I'm surprised he's such a big underdog because I guess he is smaller, he's shorter, but he's the middleweight, and Danny Barlow is the one coming up to middleweight for this fight. So I'm surprised that he's such a big favorite, Barlow. But I'll pick him anyways. He's pretty fast. He's got the lighter man skill. I don't think he's that unskilled compared to the outside of middleweight, just because middleweight's so bad right now. But as far as his sloppiness on the feet, even in the Quinlan fight, I think he broke one of his arms, but it took him forever to land a finishing punch on Quinlan, and it looked like Quinlan was just asking to get knocked out that whole fight. So I really don't think Danny Barlow is any good. He got chinned pretty bad against Sam Patterson, the guy who has no power. So I'm hesitantly gonna pick him just because Jourdain Santos is probably one of the worst middleweights, and middleweight is probably the least skilled division, at least compared to heavyweight and light heavyweight. So I guess it's the least skilled division that's as light as it is, but that's not saying a ton. So yeah, I'll go with Danny Barlow. Maybe he's from a better skill weight class, and that's why he's such a favorite. And he's not smaller than Jourdain Santos. I'll be honest, I don't think he's taller. At least he's not 6'2" versus 6 foot. I think when the fight comes, they're going to be about the same height, especially because Danny Barlow has a pretty long stance. So I'll go with him just very reluctantly. When I say very reluctantly, I mean probably by first round KO, just because if he's going to win, that's probably going to be how. It's just Jourdain Santos isn't that much worse than him from what we've seen. Next fight up the card, Bruno Silva versus Hyunsung Park. Pretty good fight. Bruno Silva, I don't think is all that good. His last 2 fights, he's looked kind of shit. He did crack Joshua Van at one point in their fight, if I remember correctly. I don't know. Literally yesterday, I just watched all of Joshua Van's fights, so maybe I'm blending the fights in my memory. But he did get dropped 4 times in that fight, and his only moments of success against Manel Cap were when he landed 4 low blows, and I think Heath Peterson was the ref. Didn't take any points, or didn't DQ him or anything like that. Maybe he did take a point. I don't know. It was kind of annoying though. And then Hyunsung Park, it's a guy who had a lot of hype coming to the UFC, but a couple months ago he gets called up for a short notice fight against Tatsuro Taira, a guy who is top 3 in the division, top 4 in the division, and that's a hard fight to come up against. And he honestly, I don't think he looked that bad in the fight. He did get dropped, but other than that, it was pretty even on the feet. Tatsuro Taira is a pretty fast, strong guy, so it wouldn't surprise me if he's got a decent amount of pop. He's not known for his technique on the feet, but it is flyweight, so getting dropped isn't that crazy, especially short notice. You don't have so much time to prepare for the striking if you're going to a short notice fight with a grappler. So I don't hate that he got dropped, and obviously he got submitted in the second round after getting his back taken. However, he did some interesting stuff, or I guess one interesting thing he did when he got his back taken. He was using 12-6 elbows on, while Tatsuro Taira was on his back, he was using them on his legs, which might sound dumb because you don't really want to punch someone's legs, especially when you have your back taken because you're giving up your chin. However, if you ever have put someone in a body triangle, you know that your legs are super I guess like flexed would be the word, like they're tense. You have to like put tension into your leg muscles to put someone in a body triangle. So hitting someone's thigh or like quad while they're in a body triangle is probably a decent move. It's probably a good way to get someone like sore or like maybe gas out the leg muscle. Interesting strategy. It didn't work, obviously. He ended up losing that fight, I think probably pretty immediately after he was doing that. But it shows me that like he's got some acumen when it comes to grappling, and I don't think that Bruno Silva will have any amount of the success that Tainara did in the grappling. So I think if this fight stays on the feet, Park's got like a pretty good edge, and Bruno Silva's a guy who gets hit a good amount and doesn't have the best chin for the division. So I think that Park can get a finish on the feet. And honestly, I kind of want to see him have his grappling tested a little bit more against the guy who's in Bruno Silva's position in the division. Obviously, he's going to have success against a guy like Carlos Hernandez, who's not very good. But is he going to have success against? Or we can guess he's probably not going to have success against Tainara, who's probably like the second best grappler in the division. However, will he have success in the grappling against a guy who's in the middle of worst in the division and best in the division? So, yeah, interesting fight. I'm going to pick Park. He's a pretty big favorite. I imagine for good reason. I can see him, being a little chinny because he did get dropped only a couple months ago. But Bruno Silva is not exactly the best finisher in the division, especially when he's been dropped like 6 times in his last 2 fights. Next fight of the card, Jourdain versus Davey Grant. Another pretty good fight. Honestly, in my head, this card was worse than I remember, or is better than I remember it being. So, I'm going to go with Davey Grant. This is hard to pick. I'm pretty 50-50. Typology is 51% Jourdain, 49% Grant. The odds are pretty close. I like Davey Grant in the matchup. He does well against like guys who aren't super active and aren't like super, forward when it comes to like looking for finishes or like looking to get like a big strike on the feet. Like Jourdain did not do a very good job in like chasing down and like putting a hurt on Sean Woodson. I know Sean Woodson is giant, and he's pretty good at that style of just like staying right outside the range. However, Jourdain had like no success, and he started to get a little sloppy going for it, and even then he didn't really find Woodson's chin at all and let that close fight get away from him. And Davey Grant is good at winning those fights. I guess other than the Daniel Marcos fight, but that fight was a pretty bad robbery, so I don't hate his performance in that. And then a lot of times when Charles Jourdain gets a finish, it's on the counter or it's a reactive thing like a guillotine. I think his last 2 finishes were against Victor Henry and Lando Veneta, and those are both guillotines that were like reactive, like it was against a shot. Like it wasn't like he was mounted or he I think both of them, they came from he got shot on and he pulled the guillotine. And I don't think Davey Grant is going to do that. I don't think he's going to like irresponsibly do an outside single leg or an outside double and leave his head in position to get guillotined by a Frenchman or a French Canadian who's got the guillotine. So I'm going to go with Davey Grant. I think that he's got a better advantage on the feet. Charles Jourdain's not the best at like pressing grappling. And if Davey Grant doesn't shoot into a bad takedown or doesn't leave his chin like on a platter, I don't really see Jourdain finishing him. And I think Davey Grant's a little bit better at winning close decisions on the feet. So I'm going to go with him. He is almost 40. He'll be 40 in 2 months. So I'm not sure. I'm sure he's not long for the division. But honestly, you could have said that about him, 5 years ago after the second Chito Vera fight. And he'd be wrong because he's on one of the better runs of his career. Arguably could have won his last 6 fights if the Yanez fight and which was a close decision, and the Marcos fight, which is robbery, went the other way. So, yeah, I mean, he's definitely there as like maybe not a title contender, but definitely like a guy who's there to be ranked. So, in a pretty dangerous division at bantamweight. So, good for Davey Grant. Next fight up the card, Kyle Nelson versus Matt Frevola. I'm going Kyle Nelson. I don't think Matt Frevola's all that good. It's weird. He gets a lot of his wins as an underdog, but honestly, a lot of people that he's beaten are there to get hurt. Did he beat Drew Dober? I can't remember. They're both the same person in my head. I don't know. He looks shit in his last 2 fights, and not even shit in that he got finished, but shit as in like he's a counter striker that's got a lot of power at lightweight, and he literally couldn't walk forward and hit his opponent at all. Kyle Nelson, I think he's coming up from 145. He was at 145 in his last couple. he didn't look the best in the last fight. He was definitely the nail, and he's not good at being the nail. But before that, I thought he looked really good against Belgaroui. That fight was a pretty early stoppage, but he was whooping on him, and that was a long finishing sequence where he was just putting on a lot of pressure on Belgaroui. He beat Fernando Padilla, who I don't think is all that good, but looked decent against Luis Pajuelo, who was supposed to be pretty good. So Callum Nelson's just pretty good if he's able to like walk forward and attack his opponent and make it like a technical-ish fight. And he didn't do good against Steve Garcia when Steve Garcia was like walking forward and going for him. However, Matt Frevola, as I just said, is pretty shit at doing that. And couldn't find any openings against Freziem or Benoit Saint-Denis, and got finished in both those fights. And I don't know if he's going to get finished in this fight, but I don't think he's going to find those openings that he's used to. And I think Callum Nelson's chin is also going to be improved because he's up weight class. So yeah. Also, he didn't really get finished in the last fight. It wasn't like a super early stoppage against Steve Garcia, but it was a little early, and he got elbowed right on the fucking brainstem, which is illegal, and the ref didn't do anything about it. If you, I don't know if you remember from that fight, right after the fight, Callum Nelson's, I think his wife, tweeted out a picture of the back of his head, and there was just like a giant knot right on like the, rule book chart of where not to hit someone. So, yeah, fuck Steve Garcia for that. He's got a main event coming up, but not a terrible loss. Steve Garcia just went on and dominated Calvin Kattar, so not a terrible loss. But yeah, I'll pick Callum Nelson. I think he's the better fighter. I think Matt Frevola is kind of overrated just because he's pretty popular, and most of the time when people think of him, they think of, well, I guess now people think of him getting knocked out by Freziem, but they think of him knocking out like. I guess people probably think of him getting knocked out by McKinney, but he's got a couple flashy knockouts. So I think people overrate him a little bit, but he's all not that good, and he's 35 years old and he only got 11 wins. Not a great look. So I'm gonna go with Callum Nelson. Next fight of the card: Cody Gibson versus Aori Qileng. I'm going with Aori Qileng. Honestly, I don't remember why. I just think Cody Gibson's pretty shit. He looked decent against Damon Blackshear in his last fight. And he's got wins over Chad Anheliger and Brian Keller. Brian Keller is shit. That win doesn't really count. But Chad Anheliger I thought was pretty good on the come up. But I don't know if I really think so anymore. Damon Blackshear, I know it's just like waxing poetic about how good Davey Grant is, but Damon Blackshear looked really shit in that fight. And if that's the performance he's going to have right after beating Cody Gibson, I'm not super hot on Cody Gibson's like close fight with him. And then Aori Qileng I thought looked pretty good against Raul Rosas Jr. except in the grappling. And I don't think Cody Gibson is half the grappler of Raul Rosas Jr. So maybe Rosas is just shit on the feet, but maybe Aori Qileng is actually pretty decent. Maybe he's pretty he's improved a little bit. So I'm gonna go with him to just beat Cody Gibson on the feet, because Cody Gibson is fucking what? I think he's 150 years old, something like that. So. Yeah, next up the card. Manon Fiorot versus Jasmine Jasudavicius. I'm going to go with the underdog of Jasmine Jasudavicius. I'm pretty high on her. I think she's pretty solid. I've liked all of her performances recently. Again, she's not the best striker on the feet. She looked pretty bad against Tracy Cortez. That was a close fight. That could have gone either way. I'm pretty sure it was a unanimous decision loss, but I could see someone scoring it for her. Like, it was a close tit-for-tat fight on the feet. And obviously, Manon Fiorot just went to a close decision with Valentina Shevchenko, so people are pretty high on her. But I think Shevchenko has been shit for years. I don't think she's all that good. She didn't try to push the grappling at all. And I know Erin Blanchfield tried to push the grappling against Manon Fiorot. But Erin Blanchfield is shit at getting takedowns. And if she can't back her opponent against the fence, when she doesn't cut off the cage, she's going to struggle to get takedowns. And Jasmine Jasudavicius, not the best cage cutter either, but she can actually get open mat takedowns. Like, she can get takedowns without being in the center of the cage. And if she's able to do that against Manon Fiorot, I think Manon Fiorot is probably not, like, most people were picking Blanchfield to win because they're like, oh, if Blanchfield takes down Manon Fiorot, she's probably going to get a finish or clearly win the round. And that was a 5-round fight. So if Jasmine Jasudavicius can do that in 2 of the 3 rounds or get a finish in any point in the fight, she's going to win. Assuming you think Jasudavicius as good in dominant positions as Blanchfield is, which I don't have any reason to think otherwise. Like, she looked really good in her last couple, and she's also looked improved despite being 36. So I'm picking her. Yeah, Like, I don't think Fiorot is all that good in the grappling. I think she's pretty, I don't want to say overrated because we haven't really seen her be, shit. I just think people are just assuming that she's really good in, like, grappling just because she stuffed takedowns of Erin Blanchfield. And Erin Blanchfield looked, like, literally, if she tried those takedowns, first of all, she attempted, like, 3 takedowns in that 25-minute fight. And second of all, if she attempted those 3 takedowns on me, I would have stuffed all of them. I would have won the fight. So, I don't know. I'm going to go with, I feel like people are overrating Fiorot because of that performance and the Shevchenko fight. And I think Blanchfield and Shevchenko, especially Blanchfield in that fight, are fucking dog shit. So, I'll go with Jazz Vicious. Next fight of the card, Marlon Vera versus Aiemann Zahabi. I'm going with Marlon Vera. Again, I just don't think Aiemann Zahabi's all that good. I know he did he allegedly beat Aldo despite doing literally nothing in the second round. I know Aldo didn't do shit either, but that was a close round, and everyone just like, oh, we'll just give it to Aiemann Zahabi, I guess. In the third round, he got dropped twice. He literally got fucking dropped bad, and then he got soccer kicked in the face, like for a complete knockdown, was rocked all over the place. And everyone just unanimously gave the round to Zahabi. Now, I know that Aldo's body language and, position at the end was pretty bad. He looked like he might have got finished if there was 30 seconds left in the fight. However, he didn't get hit. He got hit by like fucking 6 ground and pound strikes, and people were like, oh, let's completely negate 2 knockdowns and unanimously give Zahabi the round. And fucking Dominic Cruz on the commentary was like, was that a 10-8 for Zahabi? Like, he didn't get dropped twice in that round. So, I'm a little mad about that decision. And Aldo is one of my favorite fighters ever, so maybe I'm a little biased. But I don't think Zahabi looked all that good in that fight. If Aldo didn't gas, which, by the way, Chito Vera won't because he's got pretty good cardio and he's a pretty low-activity fighter. If Aldo didn't gas, everyone would be like, Jesus Christ, Zahabi looked horrible in that fight. What a mismatch. Why was he a favorite? And I don't think a lot of people are picking Zahabi because they thought Aldo was going to gas. I know Aldo does gas, but it was a 3-round fight. And, Zahabi looks kind of chinny, so I don't really think a lot of people are like, Zahabi's going to survive a beatdown and get a late finish. And he did, but if he didn't, like if Aldo didn't gas, especially, with the bad weight cut and everything like that, if he didn't gas, people would have said Zahabi looked like shit, and no one would be picking Zahabi to beat Marlon Vera. Everyone would be saying, why is Zahabi getting Marlon Vera? All he did was beat Farid Basharat. So, Marlon Vera, he's pretty dangerous. I can see this fight being like the Rob Font fight. It is only 3 rounds, which I think benefits Marlon Vera. I know I just said he has good cardio and low output, but in that Rob Font fight, his cardio didn't matter a ton because he was getting outlanded like, I don't even know if it's hyperbole to say he was getting outlanded 4-1 every round, but at the end of like 4 of the 5 rounds, he would just rock Rob Font really badly and almost finish him. And that won him the fight. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if he just rocks Zahabi twice in this fight, or Zahabi, who's not super dangerous and not very good at pressuring fighters, doesn't really have any big moments either. And Marlon Vera wins by having 2 close rounds in a round where he almost finishes Zahabi. So I'm going to go with Marlon Vera, probably by decision. I think Vera's got a good chance at finishing any fighter, but the way he wasn't able to finish Font, doesn't motivate me to pick him by finish. Because I think this fight's gonna be pretty similar to that one. And Zahabi looked pretty, good at not getting finished in his last fight. He got finished by Ricardo Ramos, but I think that's the only time he's been finished. God, he's old. He's 37. Fucking hell. I think he's older than Aldo. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not super high on Zahabi. I know he beat one of the best, featherweights ever. But I think there's a ton of context to that fight. And honestly, I don't think he beats any other, I'm getting a little flustered. I don't think that Aiemann Zahabi beats the Jose Aldo that showed up for any other fight in Jose Aldo's career. And I don't think Zahabi beats that version of Jose Aldo more than 5 times out of 10. So I don't think he's all that good. I think people are overrating him because he beat Aldo. Which sucks to say because I love Aldo, and that should be a great win on everyone's record. It's just like there was a lot of context to that fight, and I wasn't impressed by his performance, despite him beating one of the best fighters ever. So I'm picking Vera. Did Vera ever fight Aldo? I feel like he did. Maybe that fight got canceled. My memory for that era, like 2021, 2022, is not the best. But yeah, I'll go with Marlon Vera. Co-main event. Why is this the co-main event? What the hell? Kevin Holland versus Mike Malott. I'm going with Mike Malott. I just don't want to pick Holland after like some of his recent performances. He beat Luque. and finished him in the first round, which is kind of impressive. Yoel Alvarez couldn't finish, Luque. But again, that was kind of a weird fight. Kevin Holland looked decent against Gunnar Nelson, but I think this is a completely different fight. And Mike Malott, he looked good in his last fight. He finished, what's his name, the Charles Radke guy. He was winning against Neil Magny before he got finished. He looked good against Trevin Giles in like a technical tit-for-tat fight. I think Trevin Giles is a kind of maybe not a similar style to Kevin Holland, but he's got a similar build. He's long and rangy. He's kind of dangerous. I think that, Mike Malott will probably have a similar performance on the feet as he did against Trevin Giles. And Kevin Holland is a decent grappler, but he doesn't have the best takedown offense. Like when I think of his recent submissions, it's the Luque fight where Luque, I can't remember how they ended up on the ground, but Luque was like getting up or maybe shooting a takedown, and he left his neck open for a Darce choke. And the Mikhail Oksachuk fight, Mikhail Oksachuk dropped Kevin Holland and then got armbarred. So it wasn't like Kevin Holland's offensive grappling that got him there. And then I think Mike Malott's like a well-trained enough guy that I trust that he's probably a pretty decent counter grappler. So I'm probably going to pick him. Like the leg kicks too that he did against Neil Magny. Like Jake Matthews didn't do it. Zaleski dos Santos didn't do it. At least those two, or at least Mike Malott, who got like completely fraud checked and like bitched by Neil Magny, was smart enough to like know that Neil Magny doesn't check low kicks and you could just spam them, and he kind of did that and was winning the fight by doing that, which makes me think he's not like, as dumb as Jake Matthews or as dumb as Zaleski dos Santos. So that makes me a little more confident in picking him for this fight. I just don't really trust Kevin Holland. His last fight was so bad against such a bad fighter that like, why would I pick him? So like even like in my memory, I thought of the Kevin Holland fight against Daniel Rodriguez as like Holland is a better fighter. He just got cracked a couple times and his chin didn't look very good. But then I rewatched it. It's like even in the tit for tat, like he was kind of not doing that good. Like he was losing to Daniel Rodriguez, who you should just shit on because he's a bad fighter. And he wasn't doing it. And then like even in the grappling, he wasn't having that much success. He was rocked for a lot of it, but like it's Daniel Rodriguez, dude. It's like Kevin Gastelum beat this guy. So I'm gonna go with Mike Malott or Malott. How the fuck you pronounce the name? All right, main event: Reinier de Ridder versus Brendan Allen. I'm going with Reinier de Ridder. I'm picking Reinier de Ridder. He's a big favorite. Brendan Allen's taking this fight on short notice. I'm sure he's in shape. There's a couple things. A couple weaknesses for Brendan Allen. By the way, I think Brendan Allen has a pretty decent chance of winning this fight because he's got good counter grappling, and he's like, he's not great on the feet, but I think anyone can tag Reinier de Ridder, who's just so open, especially over 5 rounds. So Brendan Allen fought Paul Craig, and he dominated him. And Paul Craig is kind of similar to Reinier de Ridder in that he's not got a ton of weapons on the feet, and he's mainly like a off-his-back jiu-jitsu grappler. However, Brendan Allen succeeded a lot in the wrestling, and Reinier de Ridder's actually got some pretty decent wrestling. I'm horrible at saying Reinier de Ridder. Something about my mouth doesn't let me say it. But, his wrestling's pretty solid. And Brendan Allen didn't, honestly, if you're fighting Paul Craig and you're, like, a ranked middleweight, you should, like, have a JDM-level performance where you're, like, styling on him, throwing, upward elbows and spinning back fists and shit. And Brendan Allen didn't look that good on the feet against Paul Craig and, resorted to grappling to win that fight, which is... That kind of shows me, he's probably not going to land the strike to knock out Reinier de Ridder. And then also, he didn't look that good in the grappling. It was mainly taking down Paul Craig and then, landing some decent ground and pound. But everyone that's fought Paul Craig has done that. So, I'm not that impressed by that fight. And if you're going to beat Reinier de Ridder, I want to see you have, a pretty dominant, maybe not completely out wrestling grappling, but do what Modestas Bukauskas did. Take him down, get in a half guard, and then just hit his weak chin that he doesn't guard. Just do that, or just knock him out on the feet like Kyle Browler did. I don't know. And then also in the Strickland fight, which was Allen's last loss before his before he went on that win streak, he was breaking to the body. That's how he quit. He started to break against the fence. And Reinier de Ridder has those insane, fight-stopping knees that he finished Bo Nickel with, and he almost finished Robert Whittaker with multiple times. And I feel like taking this fight on short notice, a guy who ends up against the cage a lot is probably going to get hit by those knees and quit like right away. With a history of quitting. So what was the other thing? Oh yeah, against Paul Craig, he almost got calf slicered and he gave up his back from it. I know like Paul Craig's pretty good at that kind of shit, but Randy Ritter is also pretty good, and I feel like if he gives up his back in some situation, he's just going to get choked out and finished. I don't know if he's going to get calf slicered, but I can see Ritter hitting him with some creative shit and finish him. He also got submitted by Fluffy Hernandez in their first fight, I believe, not in their most recent. Did he? No, he went to a decision with Fluffy Hernandez. Well, regardless, Fluffy Hernandez, pretty similar to fight, maybe not that similar, but kind of similar to Ritter. And also, I'm pretty sure Fluffy Hernandez submitted him in their first fight with like a creative submission, like the seated arm triangle. And I could see Ritter doing some similar shit. Fluffy ended up in that, and even in their most recent fight, in the turtle, or in like the north-south position, kind of a lot. And I can see Ritter being pretty good there with long arms, with darces and anacondas and seated arm triangles. So, yeah, I'm picking Ritter by submission or a TKO against the fence, kind of like the Bo Nickel fight. If you watch the Bo Nickel finish next to the Sean Strickland finishing Brendan Allen, it's pretty similar. Like, they just get hit to the body. Brendan Allen took a couple punches to the face, and then he just shelled up and turned around against the cage, and then the ref waved the fight off, and he just kind of sank into his frame. So I think something similar is going to happen, and I'm going to pick Randy Ritter. So let me know if you agree or disagree with my picks. I picked kind of a decent amount of underdogs, but honestly, the last couple Canada cards has been a bunch of underdogs winning, especially the UFC 297. So let me know if you agree or disagree. Comment if you want to hear more about a certain pick. You can also go follow me on Twitter. I've live tweeted every UFC event this year for the most part. I will continue to live tweet events. I think this is the only fights this weekend. But a lot of good fights coming up the next couple of months in boxing, in kickboxing, in Muay Thai, and in MMA. So I'll be live tweeting most of those. Like the video, share the video, subscribe, comment if you want to hear more about a certain pick or something like that, or if you just want to leave a comment. And I'm away from home right now, so I have my laptop, but I can't record any gameplay, so I'll just put some old gameplay if I have any, and if not, I'll probably just loop like a minute-long fight or something. But that is all. Thank you for listening.